Hello and welcome back to Chakra News. We're tracking the India-Pakistan tensions. This is a special series of podcasts that fantastic tri-services counter-terrorist operation that resulted in a crushing defeat for Pakistan in the 100 or so hours that the Indian forces acted on all fronts. We've heard stories about the indigenous defense systems that were used by Indian forces, the Brahmos missiles, Sukhois, Akash missiles, and of course the IACCS. We're going to go a little back into the kind of policies that enabled the rise of these systems, why there is no option for us but to go indigenous or Atmanirbhar. We're going to be talking to my friend, my colleague, Colonel Anurag Awasthi. Colonel Awasthi, welcome back.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you very much.
As always, because he's had a ringside view of these changes as they unfolded in the Defense Ministry. Operation Sindur, a very unique aspect of Operation Sindur, Colonel Awasthi, which the government has come out with very strongly, talking about the role of indigenous defense systems in Operation Sindur. While it was a strategic success, the operation, the hidden story behind this strategic success that the Indian Armed Forces, the Army, Navy, and Air Force have achieved through Sindur seems to be the use of indigenous systems.
Yes.
And today I'm going to be talking about this with Colonel Awasthi, who's been part of the process in the Defense Ministry. We had a close look at the way a lot of these policies were firmed up, and we're going to talk about how this enabled this indigenous defense ecosystem and what we need to do in the years ahead. So once again, Colonel Awasthi, welcome back to Chakra News, and we should
Thank you, Sandeep.
straight off talk about the indigenous role, the role of indigenous defense systems, actually. But let's start off by the 5 big takeaways, according to you, for indigenous defense capability in Operation Sindur.
Let me start with the initial part as to how the indigenous systems were developed in this country. A lot of people have a lot of vagueness about the system, and they think that things like these, which high technology and everything, can be done overnight. But let me segue you back to 1989, when the 187th report of the Public Accounts Committee was made public. And somewhere around 1992 was when the first guidelines for indigenization came in.
Right. So this is a time when India is still largely dependent on
largely
imports.
dependent on imports, and
You had your PSUs and your OFBs that were
doing
making
whatever they
small
were doing.
stuff.
Yes,
Right.
essentially
Not
small
high tech.
stuff, not high tech at all. Now, somewhere after that, when the Kargil Group of Ministers report came out in 1999, after the Kargil War in 1999,
That is 2000.
in 2000, that is the time a need was felt that now it is time to get indigenization back on the track, for a simple reason, because we saw the shortages and the various other issues insofar as importing things were concerned during the war were concerned. So lo and behold, in 2002 was the first time the first defense procurement procedure was unveiled by the government of India. Now, this was unveiled with the business that, what exactly needs to be done, what is the procedure, how do we need to do, but still indigenization was not on the agenda.
Right. Yeah, and this is important. Why Kargil was so important is that you saw the fact that we were running low on ammunition and we had to import ammunition. We didn't have precision guided munitions. There were shortages across the board.
And the cost, Sandeep, people charged you, I don't know how much times the cost.
4-5 times.
Yes,
that is because the arms business is a ruthless business.
They bled you in terms of the costing. Then sometime around 2003, the defense procurement procedure was again revised. And in 2005, when the defense procurement procedure came in back again, that is the first time a category called MAKE came in. Make in India. MAKE. The first category called MAKE. Now this was revised back again in 2006. And in 2006, a lot of things were added. And then it came as a new version, and it was decided that every 2 years, the defense procurement procedure will be revised by the government of India. So in 2008, when the DPP came in, that is the time a lot of things changed. They put in offset clauses. They put in vendor-based management. They put in a large number of issues which were related to indigenization,
Right.
etc.
Yeah.
Now, this gave way to the Defense Procurement Procedure 2011, and that is where a large amount of shipbuilding things came into being.
Right.
Various processes of shipbuildings,
Yeah.
etc. The turning point, Sandeep, was 2013,
Right.
where 5 categories were very clearly defined in which indigenization took root.
Right. But, tell me why this is important to put it down as policy documents. I mean, I'm just looking at it from a layperson's view. How does it make a difference?
See, when you buy something or when you procure something, there has to be a categorization.
Right. A process. Right.
Now, when you don't have a process which incentivizes the Indian ecosystem, then what do you buy? So you only depend on the global players.
Right.
So by around 2013, when the defense procurement procedure got in, these categories were pronounced.
Right.
And then came the trailblazing 2016.
Right.
And that is the time the defense minister or Honorable Raksha Mantri was late Manohar Parrikar. And that is the time you inserted the enabling by Indian IDDM.
IDDM. The thing is, Colonel Awasthi, Manohar Parrikar is an interesting defense minister because this is the only defense minister in India, in independent India, who's been a technocrat. He was from the IIT Bombay, and he was a startup. He ran a defense startup.
Yes.
In fact, I remember this closed door meeting he had with the MSMEs in the defense business, and he said, "Look, I feel your pain. I know how important you are to the defense ecosystem because I was one of you, And the story goes that he was part of a DRDO project. He was asked to innovate a certain component for a DRDO project, which was the Sarvatra,
the bridge
laying system. And he had invested his own money, capital, and resources to perfect that system, but he was not given the contract because he was asked to then go and bid again for that whole thing. So he said, "Look, I know the pain that you feel as innovators."
As the honorable Raksha Mantri, Sandeep, A, he understood technology.
Right.
B, he knew the pain points.
Yeah.
C, he had come from the ground basic. He knew what is required. The issue of defense indigenization is, what do you want?
Yeah.
How do you want it? And in what context do you want it? If these 3 questions are not answered, then there's a problem. Now, all this changed in 2016 when the Buy Indian IDDM, indigenously developed, designed, and manufactured, category came into being, and that was number 1.
Right.
That was at precedence number 1 priority, absolute priority.
So, explain to us again, what is IDDM? A lot of people don't get the difference between, say, a Sukhoi 30 MKI, which is manufactured in India.
Right.
It's largely assembled. It's CKD. Large components of large percentage of those components are made in India, but it's not entirely IDDM. So just explain to us what the difference is.
Indigenously designed, developed, and manufactured essentially looks at the percentage of indigenization.
Right.
Like a Sukhoi 30 you just mentioned, that is being built under license.
Yes.
That is under a manufacturing TOT. That's a transfer of technology.
You don't hold the
you do not
IP,
hold the design,
you don't hold any design, nothing.
IP,
you can't modify it without the design. Right. That's an important distinction.
That is very important.
Right.
In IDDM, what you do is you put in what is the indigenous content.
Right.
That depends what is being talked about. And then thereafter, you put it and pitch it as a category for procurement in the Indian defense ecosystem. Now, post putting this as the IDDM category, there were 2 categories called Make 1 and Make 2, which were unveiled by the government in DPP 2016. Make 1 was essentially government funded, but with the private players putting in some percentage of equity. And Make 2 was totally industry funded with government putting in some amount of equity. Both are very, very enabling, extremely enabling. Lo and behold, you come down to 2020 and the defense procurement procedure changes to defense acquisition procedure.
Yeah, DAP.
Right. 2020.
Why is the nomenclature important?
Now, DAP nomenclature is important because there are 2 documents. There's something called the Defense Procurement Manual also. So you have amalgamated most of them into one procedure.
Right.
Now, DAP 2020 was one of the most enabling things for
Yeah.
indigenization.
Yeah.
It brought about a revolutionary change in terms of offsets. The focus was on import substitution. It said that most of the components, spares, etc., need to be indigenized. It brought out the indigenization lists in 2020, and there have been 5 indigenization lists.
Those positive
the positive
indigenization list, which basically tells the government
Yes.
that there are certain, or the armed forces, there are categories you cannot import because
Absolutely.
they're all being made
they're
within the
here.
country.
Or they can be made here in the
Right.
country. Now, the MSMEs, whether it is critical technology or whether it is defense technology, is the mainstay of India. That's the
Right.
backbone.
MSMEs.
That's the backbone.
Right.
So all this positive indigenization lists, so carefully curated by the Ministry of Defense and the service headquarters, I think is going to be a game changer in times to come. 5 have come, more in the offing.
Right.
And then you change the policy on offsets,
Right.
you change the policy on the indigenization, you change the percentage of FDI in defense at 74%.
Right.
So very, very enabling. Right. So when you look at this entire journey from 1989 to the Government of Ministers report post Kargil, to all the iterations of the procurement procedures, now down to DAP 2020 and all that has happened beyond that. Now, post 2020, see how much has happened. The positive indigenization lists.
Right.
The IDDM came into being in the Department of Defense Production.
IDDM being the innovations for defense.
So that is essentially a program which is run by the Department of Defense Production in the MOD. Which is a very, very enabling program for great startups, for wonderful technologies, innovators, etc.
We have 2,200 startups. It's the largest in the world. The largest number of defense startups in the world. I've, Colonel Awasthi, I've been covering defense here in Delhi for 20 years now. And when you said 2020, I've actually seen more change in the last 5 years in Delhi than I have in the preceding 15 years.
Yes, the labor of love is in front of you.
Yes.
Post Op Sindur.
So Op Sindur, tell us why Op Sindur is so critical. What are the lessons that we've actually learned from Op Sindur? As they say, the proof of the pudding lies in the eating. What was the eating part in Op Sindur?
You look at the ecosystem in Op Sindur.
Let's look at the big picture.
Let's
first.
look at the big picture
the
and first
global,
the global.
Yes,
this thing. Now, you had indigenous systems which were part of your air defense. Now, air defense, as brought out on the 14th May communique in the Press Information Bureau by the Government of India. I'm sure we've all read it.
Yes.
So it says very clearly that it is the first wall of defense, or it says that it is the first wall of defense, essentially based on technology.
Right.
So you look at Akash, you look at the other systems which are along with Akash. You look at the Rajendra radar, which is a phased array radar, which is looking at the command and control center of Akash, medium range missile system.
Right.
You look at the lethal Brahmos. The
Indo-Russian supersonic cruise missile, of course.
It is superb.
And married on to the Su-30
married on
MKI.
to the Sukhoi 30 MKI. Imagine
Indian
a missile,
innovation. Yes.
A missile looking at nearly 77 or 78 test firings in various versions, land, sea, and air.
It's been in service for 20 years.
More than that.
That's a
versatile.
long time. Yeah, versatile. An Indian solution, which is the Su-30 MKI with the Brahmos air-launched cruise missile, range in excess of 400 kilometers. And we saw that kind of devastation. Precise, calibrated devastation on all of the targets. Nothing in excess, nothing less. Just exactly the message that you want to.
Correct.
Punctuation marks.
Where it's a full stop. It's not a comma.
Yeah. But the global picture that I was asking you is that what is the big lesson for India when it came to the way the world responded to us?
Yes. See,
how did they support us? How did they not support us? And why is this important?
Yes. Now you see, Op Sindur, Sandeep. We have to be a little dispassionate on this. Somebody said a long time ago that there are no permanent friends or enemies. They're only permanent interests. Right. So if you see Op Sindur, except for one or two, there was not an unequivocal support to India.
I think the only people who really came out, the only country that came out in our emphatically
Was Israel.
supported was Israel.
Yes, that's all. So while there was no unequivocal support to India, it gives us a message. It gives us a message that we need to look at our own indigenous industry in case we have to prosecute operations and wars of the future. That is one. The second and most important part which comes out of Sindur is that you cannot depend on global supply chains.
Right. That's very important. Yes.
You cannot depend on global supply chains because, as I mentioned to you, there is a person who would be wanting to buy something at a particular time of distress. There would be a person who would be wanting to sell something at a time of distress and possibly make a killing in terms of cost, quantity, and quality.
Yeah. But, also more important is that when you see the kind of statements that are coming out, say the American president, Trump says that I used, trade as a leverage against India and Pakistan to try and get them to the negotiating table, which, of course, the government of India has denied. But imagine if you had American weapon systems in play.
Yeah.
And the American president says, I used weapons as a leverage against India to get them to negotiate or to come up with a ceasefire, which there is no ceasefire incidentally. But that tells you the kind of leverage that big countries, arms suppliers have on countries that don't have their own weapon systems.
You look at the economies of various countries which are thriving on the military-industrial complex.
Right. So that, in essence, would be the biggest lesson for us.
Yes, it is. So
you have no option but to make your own stuff.
Of course, you have to fight Indian wars with Indian solutions.
That's it. Indian wars with Indian
There
solutions.
is no other option.
Right.
Because if you don't do it, then how can you be severed at a time and place of your own choosing? Then how do you prosecute what you need to do in that given time frame?
Yes.
So somewhere down the line, the government has understood this clearly, especially from 2016.
Yeah.
From 2016 to 2020, you look at
Yes.
the entire landmarks,
Yeah.
indigenization lists, putting in a lot of money into IDDM,
Right.
the Technology Development Fund by DRDO.
Right.
You are putting in so much of effort into the startups.
Yeah.
There are drone ecosystems which are being, looked at and nurtured. Now, see, Sandeep, I also must mention to you, the era of those garage startups is over, right? That is one point.
The garage startups are the ones
those smalls,
right.
like, everybody says that Google started like this and Microsoft started like that. And, these guys were in a garage and, Yahoo started like that. So that's passé. That doesn't work anymore. So all innovation, especially in these critical sectors, requires money and capital.
Right.
That is one. The second part is a lot of people miss the woods for the trees. They say that, R&D or innovation is a function of cerebral acumen.
Yeah.
No, it isn't.
Right.
R&D and innovation is a function of money. So the more amount of money you put in, you are not putting in money for wastage. You are putting in that money to make it as a bridge for failures till you get the product right.
Right.
The third part is that the government of India has now realized that while you may have the technology or while you may be able to make subsystems or components, or you may be wanting to be a part of a bigger ecosystem, till such time India becomes a product nation, there is a problem.
Important, very, very important.
You have to create a product.
Yes.
And this has been amply given, a great fillip insofar as Sindur is concerned, where you've seen Brahmos.
Brahmos and the Sukhoi.
You've seen the Sukhoi.
IACCS.
IACCS. The Akash Tir. The Akash.
Air Defense Command and Control System. IACCS.
State of the art.
Entirely Indian developed.
Completely.
By Bell.
Completely.
Slowly built up over the years.
Yes. And see how it changed. Sometime around, post the DAP 2020, you had corporatization of the Ordnance Factory Board.
That is possibly the most historic reform.
The biggest reform. Then your DPSUs are now in the blue. You see their stocks.
Yeah.
You see the stocks of HAL,
right.
or you see the other stocks.
Right.
None of them would give you a give you a picture that it's a sick unit.
Right.
It isn't so.
We know that now, Colonel Awasthi, the fact is that indigenous, our faith in indigenous systems is validated. You have the proof of the pudding now in systems like the Brahmos and the Sukhoi, indigenous solutions,
Absolutely.
Indian solutions for Indian problems. You have the IACCS, of course, the Akash missile, all of that. What next now? We're in 2025. We're in the middle of a ongoing military operation. Sindur is still on, by the way. And you have a DAP that's around the corner. You have a DAP 2025 or 2026. What, look into the crystal ball, given your experience in the system and what you've seen with Op Sindur, what are the big takeaways? What are the lessons that you feel that, we should kind of work on in the next couple of months and put down as articles of faith? We are very clear on the fact that you have to fight Indian wars with Indian solutions.
Absolutely.
So this is a given, right? That's one of the commandments. What would be the other lessons that you think should be enshrined in both policy and in speech and in action?
Right. That's a wonderful question. The first thing would be infusion of money for the tech sector insofar as defense and aerospace and critical technology.
From the government and from the
government and
the primes,
from the
defense
private
primes.
entities.
Right.
And that is critical because, you can't just keep looking at the government every time that, the government, notifies a scheme and, somebody latches onto it. What about the private sector?
Yeah.
They have to put in their share of the pie too. That is one. The second part is when you are looking at these critical systems of tomorrow, you have to look at the ancillary systems also, the support systems, which come as part of this entire ecosystem. That also needs a lot of effort for development. Now, the third thing is DRDO is undergoing a lot of reforms as we speak. And while a lot of people may say a lot of things or may have a lot of opinions about DRDO, I think it has done a fabulous job.
Right.
In the last, more than 70, 75 years, it has done a fabulous job.
Yeah, we're completely indigenously self-sufficient in strategic systems.
There you go. Right. So strategically, I think DRDO has been a great success story. Now, the problem at hand that I see is that somewhere down the line, we will have to put in a lot of faith or financial faith between the private entities and the government. That faith is still a little away.
You mean the government needs to trust the private sector more?
They
need a level playing field. You need to get them as part of the Indian military-industrial complex.
Absolutely. Now you look at Akash, or you look at various other systems. Let's look at even Brahmos. So there are enough private sector players in that also. You have the TAS, you have the Bell, you have various other things. Now the most important thing is, while there are a lot of players in the defense and aerospace segment here in India who are doing some outstanding work and they're creating products, when they go to an export market, the first question which is liable to be asked by anybody is your armed force, whether it is the Army, Navy or the Air Force, is it using it?
Right.
So if the answer is in negative, there is a problem.
There is a problem. Absolutely.
There is a problem.
So you need to place orders on your industry.
Yes.
Very clear.
And all these orders have to be recurring orders because finally, if you are setting up something to make such an high-tech kind of a thing, then would you want very small orders or would you want recurring orders?
Right.
Because there has to be a business case.
Absolutely. You can't set up a production plant for 5 or 10 orders.
Yes, for a low population equipment.
Yes.
And then in the same breath, we will have to pruning down the inventory management.
Inventory management, absolutely.
If you prune down the inventory management, you give a lot of fillip to the public-private partnerships. You give a lot of funding insofar as the innovating, startups and MSMEs are concerned. You give rise to innovation carte blanche into the, in the private sector. Give funding to the academic institutions and academia, but with a caveat of accountability.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, you can't just be looking at creating papers. You
Yeah.
need products. This
Products,
is
absolutely.
India of
Yes.
2025.
Yeah.
Please bring products to the table.
Right.
You bring a product to the table, you won half the battle. The
Yeah.
product gives you the IPR. The
Yes.
product gives you the money. The product can be monetized. The product is your stamp.
Is your
The
stamp.
product tells you that you have arrived.
And it also gives you effects in your adversaries, infrastructure and airfields and all that, as you've seen. But very important lessons there, Colonel Awasthi. But what other lessons do you think we should enshrine in this new DAP 2025? Since it's so important, you're a policy guy.
I think we should be thinking bigger, far bigger than the beggar,
right,
the bluster, and the bully.
Right.
I'm sure what you mean. I know what you
the beggar,
are looking at.
The bluster,
and the bully.
You
need to think bigger than
think
them.
Bigger.
Yes.
Right.
And be very clear that you have to give a lot of impetus to the Indian defense and aerospace ecosystem.
Yes.
Look at niche segments.
Right.
Drones, electronic warfare, software-defined radios. You have to look at various systems which are control and reporting systems insofar as electronics are concerned. Look at dual technologies. Look at a lot of joint ventures between the critical electronics players and semiconductor players along with the defense ecosystem, so that there are co-joint lessons and vectors which lead to some great fruitions in future.
Right.
And be patient, Sandeep.
Right.
This is innovation. This is defense and aerospace. This is critical technologies. Rome wasn't built in a day. India has been built over in the
thousands of years.
Thousands of years. And and beyond a point, we have to understand, even after Sindur, that the scriptures say very clearly that whosoever has taken birth will die. India is eternal. It has never taken birth. Pakistan was born on 14th August 1947.
Right.
So it just might die. So keeping that as a backdrop, I think all our focus has to be on defense indigenization. You have to fight Indian wars with Indian solutions.
Absolutely.
There is no other option, because in case you don't do it, then I think we need to recalibrate a lot of things for the future warfare and future war fighting and future thinking insofar as how we are going to be employing things which are peculiar to our terrain, which are peculiar to our war fighting capability, and which are very, very peculiar to our handling.
Yes.
Which has the language which we can understand, which is there on the weapon
Absolutely.
system.
Indian wars with Indian solutions. And that's the commandment that's written in stone after Operation Sindur. Thanks very much, Colonel Awasthi, for illustrating that in such great detail and why we have no option but to go indigenous or Atmanirbhar.
Thank you, Sandeep. Glad to be on your show again.